Hey you guys, welcome to a whole new tutorial. I'm going to go in depth with you guys on this painting of the 3 Siamese cats. And I think the way that I'm going to divide it up is to do at least 4 videos. It might take more though. There is a lot of footage. There's 7 hours of footage. So I'm going to do the black cat in one video, the darker Siamese cat in another, and then the lighter lilac point Siamese in another. And I'm not going to do anything on the background because, as you guys probably know if you're following me, I already did a video about the background where I described my push technique when I'm painting stripes. So I probably won't go over the background again. But also, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I release a new video at least once a week, sometimes twice a week. And if you would like to learn from me more closely, go and take a look at my Patreon page where you only have to pay $5 a month and you will have access to my in-depth tutorials like I just finished with the Bengal cat. Okay, let's get started, and we're gonna start with the black cat. And here's the before and after shot so you can see where we're headed. And one thing that I do want to mention about how I painted this whole commission as a whole is, if you will notice the eye on the black cat, I've made a point to make the background match the eye of the black cat. Okay, to start painting this black cat, what I did was I put down a first very light tea consistency wash of mostly ultramarine blue, but also a little bit of quinacridone rose. And I mixed those together just to keep that first layer dynamic and interesting, but soft and supportive, because the rest of the cat was going to be black, and I just wanted to have undertones of ultramarine blue and a little bit of purples in there. And so I'm wetting the entire cat's face with this light mix, and in the ears I move on to a pinker color, but I'm keeping it all very wet and light. And then I go in with some darker ultramarine blue and quinacridone rose, and that and I'm trying to get as many medium and dark tones in this first wash as I can, because the more you can do that, the fresher it's gonna look. So I'm going in here with some lamp black to really get those darks in this very first layer, but I'm also using cream consistency lamp black here, so it all kind of merges together. And you can see that along the margins between the really dark black and the lighter blue, where it's still really wet, that water is washing in to the lamp black. Okay, and then so I sprayed the back of his neck because I wanted that area to be soft, and I wanted it to kind of melt into the shadow behind his neck, because that's not a high area of interest, and I just wanted to use that as a point of attachment to the background. And if you've watched my other videos, you know that I like to attach the cats or whatever I'm painting to the background. So here I go in with some ultramarine blue to paint the shadow that is cast by the cat onto the, I guess it's a couch or something behind him. So I'm just putting in that shadow with some ultramarine blue, knowing in my mind that after it dries, much later in the process, I will go back over it and paint the stripes background that I described in my push technique video about how to paint stripes. So I'm just going in here and adding ultramarine blue in the shape of a shadow. That's one of the things I like about lamp black. It's granulating, and it's also got more of a cauliflower effect. So when a paint has more of a cauliflower effect, it will do this technique, this effect, similar to what I use in my push technique, where the water washes through and makes little rivulets, tiny, tiny little rivulets through the heavier paint, and makes some interesting fur type looking textures, or it could be a grassy looking kind of texture. But it's a really pretty effect, and lamp black is really good at doing that. So I used that to my advantage when I was painting this first layer of the cat. When I had it really wet, I wanted to go ahead and get in some of those really dark passages so that it would merge together just enough to have some interesting fur textures just from that effect alone. And then I'm going in, I'm continuing to re-wet my paper right here, and then I'll be going in with some dark ultramarine blue and also some lamp black, and I'm just putting in some of the nose details. And what I like to call this first stage sometimes is mapping out, because I'm kind of painting a map of where the most important gradations are. So like on the nose, he has that little light blue area, and then there's dark all around it. I don't want to lose that in the painting, so I get that in, I map it out in this first layer so that I know exactly where it is, so I don't get lost in the painting later. And then I'm using my Alvaro Castagnet brush here, which holds a lot of paint so that I can get a lot done quicker. The advantage of a brush like the Alvaro Castagnet brush that holds a lot of water is you don't have to keep going back to your palette to re-pick up paint, so you can get more painting done between picking up more paint into your brush. And I was wanting to work quickly here, so that's why I chose this brush. I'm also using a little, I don't know if these are Chinese or Japanese, probably Chinese brushes. And I'm working in this delicate area right here to put in those really light areas of fur where his fur is kind of thin. And I used the side of my brush to kind of scrape in some of those fur textures. And I waited till the paper was dry, and you'll probably see that later. But here I'm just continuing to work in this wet paper as long as I possibly can, with as many darks as I possibly can, to keep it really soft and fresh. So I have a new paint color to try with the painting of this black cat's eye, or her eye, is a mix of yellows and blues and greens. So I am going to try a new color in his eye. I'm gonna get this whole area wet inside the eye, and I'm gonna try an experiment. And if I don't like it, these paints that I'm going to be experimenting with are pretty granulating and they don't stain. So if I don't like how this eye looks, then I can go back and blot it out and do something different that I know works. I'm kind of doing an experiment with this eye. So I have cerulean blue. Here's the pure color. And this is a granulating, slightly dull when it dries, earth tone considered to be, so it grays things down a little bit. But the thing I like about it is that it mixes beautifully with other colors. So I'm not gonna mix them at all. I'm gonna let them mix together kind of in this cat's eyes, and I'm just gonna see what effect I get. And this cat's eyes are very light, so I'm adding a lot of water. I'm using tea consistency paint. So that was Windsor Green Gold that I just added there, and then I'm gonna put in Permanent Green Light. It's by Holbein. I'm gonna get a little bit more cerulean on my brush here. So I'm trying to keep different colors separated, and I'm gonna drag my brush through them just a little bit so they mix just a little tiny bit. But I want the paint to kind of do most of my work for me. I'm gonna put a touch of cerulean back here too. Let's see what they do when they mix together. That should have a drying shift where it goes from darker to a lot lighter. We'll see what that looks like as it dries. Maybe I'll put a little pool of clear water right in the middle here, because this cat's eyes is a lot lighter in that little area, and it'll push the paint a little bit and it'll affect the granulation. So I just put a little dot of water, which you're not going to be able to see, but as it dries, it'll create a tiny little current of water within that wash, and as it dries, it should create some interesting texture. All right, I'm going to add in the little detail of dark under this cat's nose. I'm going to mix some lamp black with some Windsor Violet, ultramarine blue, burnt sienna. It's just kind of, in other words, it's kind of my dark mix. a version of my dark mix. All right, so this has a very pretty little curve to it. And my underdrawing has been covered up. I can't see it, so I'm just strictly using my drawing skills here. I'm gonna wet the whole area in this ear. I want it to stay soft. And I'm carefully painting around this white edge that I want to save. But all this, I want to keep soft, and ears have a lot of tiny details in them, and you can kind of soften them out to add interest, and so that the eye is not drawn to this highly detailed inner ear. I think what I'm going to try to do is leave a light edge around this ear, although in the painting, in the reference photo, there is not an edge of light on this ear. I'm going to use some artistic license and add it there just so that that ear shows up more. All right, now I'm going to get a mix of Winsor Violet and Burnt Sienna for the kind of purplish reddish area this cat has. And before I lose my drawing, because this is a dark area inside the ear, I'm going to paint in the darkest passages of his ear so they don't get lost. I want to paint, not draw, so I'm gonna put these areas in, and you can see how wet my paper is. It's a little more wet than I would like it. My paint is spreading a little bit more. I think it will be fine though. And I'm not going to have as much detail. It looks like this picture was taken with a bit of a flash, and I want to tone that down a little bit anyway. This wet area is still wet. I need more clear water in this area. This is starting to dry, so I'm going to take this as an opportunity to put a little bit of fur texture in here, because this is all just kind of that light fur area. And this all kind of merges together for the most part in here anyway. I'm using the side of my brush and some water in my brush to create some of these textures that are here. And I'm kind of dry brushing through here just to put some initial furry texture, because his fur is quite thin through this area, as with many cats. So I'll go back over this and put in more details later. So, and even some softer passages probably. But see how his ear stayed nice and soft. There's a lot more harder edges in the original reference photo. And the main thing I want to capture is this pretty white edge here that kind of delineates the ear. I'm going to go back in with some very dark darks to merge these areas together. I don't know why I put masking right here. See this little S? I don't know what I was thinking. Now that I look at it, I'm like, what is that supposed to be? I don't see it in my reference photo. We'll get rid of that later. While I'm at it though, I'm going to go back in and get these dark areas dark. And it's really dried a lot. I'm going to blot that a little bit because I want it to stay soft. I just want this area to hint at ear details. I don't want it to scream ear details, just hint at them. Dry brush technique a little bit here. And then this area all kind of connects. So I'm going to go ahead and put in that dark pupil with a mix of lamp black, indigo blue, and burnt sienna. And I have lost the underpaint, the under drawing, the under tracing, whatever you want to call it. So I'm just kind of looking carefully at my reference photo at this point to make sure that I get the placement right and get the angle right, all that good stuff. And I'm going to take this opportunity to connect my components of the eye. If you just leave this black pupil floating there, it looks kind of pasted on. You want to try to attach it to something if you can. In this case, the eyeliner, I can do that. I have a tiny little sliver of white. Do you guys see that? So I'm going to try to save that because that'll just add a little bit of sparkle. Even though it's not really in the reference photo, I think it will add a tiny little bit of jewelry to the eye area that is appealing. Looking good. All right, so because I've got wet Winsor & Newton burnt sienna freshly put into my palette and it's not dried out yet to where I can control how much paint I get on my brush. For example, what I'm trying to say is if I dip my brush into this burnt sienna right now, which is completely in moist form, it's not dried out, it's not hard yet, then I can't really control how much paint I get on my brush because it just glops onto my brush. But when it dries, you can totally control how much paint you get in your brush by how much you scrub. But if I put my brush in this paint right now, I'll get too much on my brush. So I'm going to just use a little dot of it for the painting work I'm doing right now. And I'll add water to this and it'll just be a thick but cream consistency amount of burnt sienna so that I can control how much gets on my brush. So I've added some water. I might have even added too much. I'm going to pour a little bit out just so it's enough to mix with this. And I'm going to use this brush. It's just a really small brush so that I don't get too much paint up in my bristles. And then, so I'm just mixing this together to get a cream consistency amount of paint that I will use to mix into my other mixes for the dark black. So I'm making my black mix here. for this black cat in the painting. So I'm going to go in and get some burnt sienna and add that to it. And that will make it really black. And I can also add some lamp black. I'm just continuing to mix until I like what it looks like, which that's starting to look better. And I have a lot of paint in my brush. I'm going to wring it out so it's not so saturated. It's not looking good for my manicure, y'all. Now I need to re-wet this area over here. So I'm just going in and moistening my background. I'm going to splay my bristles out of my brush so that I get a jagged edge along this furry edge of the cat. All right. Now, I know that along this cat's face, I want it to be pretty darn black, pretty dark. So I'm going to make sure I've got plenty of pigment in my brush, about a cream consistency. I'm going to use my fur texture brush to work this very dark edge into the edge of the cat right here. I really want to get this one edge. I want to get the darkness in on the first try. When you have a very dark edge along a very light edge, just keep in mind that the eye is really going to be drawn to that, and you better get it right. So no pressure. All right, now I've got this very dark edge in. So I'm just going to go in with some more very dark paint. I very much like this soft edge that's created here. And I want to go in, put in some soft fur textures. See how nice and soft these stay. Now you want to draw some of these textures out. Working pretty quickly. Do not tarry. Get these right. And I don't want this to be a big black blob, but I do want it to read as dark fur. So I'm trying to keep a lot of interesting different colors on my paintbrush. Yes, Kitty. I know everybody knows you're suffering, Kitty. And then a little bit of the couch is showing through down here. So I'm just going to block that in really fast so that I don't lose it. And that will be a grayed down light green. So let me just block that in while this is all wet. And I just want this area to be really soft and dramatic and read fur of this kitty's, but I don't want it to be one big flat black blob like it is in the reference photo. So that's what I tried to accomplish right there just now. I'm gonna let this dry and bleed. I like what it's doing. So I'm just gonna let that go and we'll see what we get at the end. Okay, you guys, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial that covered how I painted the black cat. And be sure to tune in next time where I will be talking about how to paint a dark point Siamese cat. And it's mostly its fur because this cat was sleeping. So the next tutorial will be in-depth tutorial about how to paint a chocolate point Siamese cat's fur. Also, just for some of you who may be a little bit new to YouTube, you can go to my channel and click on playlists, and then you will find a whole list of all the videos for, say, the Bengal cat. Or when I get all the videos published for this tutorial, you will see all of those in a playlist together as well. So it's just easier to find each next successive video tutorial. And also, many of you may not know, if you're kind of new to YouTube, is that you can go to settings. There's a little settings icon at the bottom of this video, and you can set it to ×2 speed or 1.5 times speed. So it will go a little bit faster if you don't mind watching the video a little faster, or if you need to, because these videos are quite long. So that's something you can do, just so you know. And just know that I am changing my Patreon a little bit. I think I'm going to anyway, where I make all these tutorials available. But if you're a Patreon member, then you will be able to access the whole video tutorial series at one time, instead of having to wait every Tuesday and Thursday when I upload each new session for the public. So I'm also playing around with the idea of introducing a new tier on my Patreon where I send out paint dots, so you can try out new paint colors without having to invest a lot of money in a whole tube when you're not sure if you're going to like that paint or not. So let me know if that would be of interest to you guys. I'm trying to think of ideas of how to add interest to a higher level of my Patreon students. If you have any ideas of anything else I could offer, I would be very open to that. So thanks, you guys. Leave me a comment, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.